It began with a voice that sounded calm,
I had a little bit of it in a movie that
almost gentle, but behind that calm was fire. Harrison Ford, the man who gave the world Han Solo, Indiana Jones, and Jack Ryan, has spent a lifetime playing heroes who never lost control. Yet the truth is different. Behind the camera, Ford's silence could break glass. At 82, he no longer hides it. For decades, he built a career on discipline, loyalty, and quiet power. He never chased headlines, but when someone betrayed him, the reaction was volcanic. He smashed props in studios, walked out of contracts worth millions, and swore he would never share a set with certain actors again. The names on that list are not strangers. They are legends, friends, even family in film. But one by one, they crossed the line he never forgave. Tonight, we open the door to those hidden rivalries. The moments that changed how Hollywood saw him and how he saw Hollywood. These are not rumors. They are the stories of trust broken, respect lost, and lessons learned through silence. By the time this ends, you will see the man behind the myth, not the smile, not the hat, but the truth. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your country or your city in the comments below. And if you believe that honesty still matters in a world built on illusion, make sure to subscribe, because the story you are about to hear will change the way you see Harrison Ford forever. Number 1. Shia LaBeouf, the son who turned his back. It began in the year 2008. 19 years had passed since the last adventure of Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford was 65, older, tougher, his face carved by time like the walls of a canyon. He was returning to his most famous role, the man in the hat, the whip, and the silence. At his side stood a new kind of energy. Shia LaBeouf, only 22, still riding the fame of Transformers. The studio called it a perfect passing of the torch. But on set, the fire burned both of them. From the first week, the distance was visible. Ford moved like a craftsman measuring steel, every gesture exact, every beat rehearsed until it breathed truth. Shia worked like a storm. He broke rhythm, improvised, chased emotion more than precision. The stunt coordinator, Vic Armstrong, said it best. Watching them together felt like seeing an engineer argue with a hurricane. At first, Ford smiled. Then, the patience began to fade. Crew members remembered him walking off between takes, shaking his head, whispering that chaos was killing the film. By the second month, they barely spoke. What looked like chemistry on screen was really tension hiding behind the lines. The film was released that summer. It made more than $790 million worldwide. But the money did not matter. Critics tore it apart. Fans called it confused. And Shia did something no young actor should ever do. He turned on his own movie. In an interview, he said the actors failed to make it work, that even Ford was unhappy. In Hollywood, that kind of statement is not bravery, it is betrayal. Ford heard it, and the silence around him hardened. When asked later, he answered with the sharpest sentence of his career. I told him he was a fitting idiot. No anger in his tone, no smile either. Just a verdict. After 40 years in the business, Ford had survived everything. Rewrites, flops, directors who lost control. But he never tolerated disloyalty. The story spread faster than any trailer. Reporters quoted his words again and again, because it was rare to see Ford speak without restraint. In private, he explained that an actor's job is to protect the film, not destroy it in interviews. That was his rule, his code, the way he had worked since the 1970s. To him, the movie was a family, and Shia had broken that trust in front of the world. The years that followed drew a cruel contrast. Shia's career spiraled into scandal, arrests, and addiction. He apologized to fans, to directors, but never again to Ford. Ford, on the other hand, kept moving, quiet and deliberate. He returned once more for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, this time alone. No young partner, no reunion, Just him and the legacy that refused to die. When asked about Shia again, he said nothing. No bitterness, no defense. Only the silence of a man who had closed a chapter forever. Because to Harrison Ford, loyalty is not a word you say in interviews. It is a line you draw in stone, and once you cross it, there is no way back. Number 2, Tommy Lee Jones, The Wolf He Could Not Tame. It was 1993, the year The Fugitive stormed theaters and turned a simple chase story into one of Hollywood's greatest thrillers. Harrison Ford was 51, calm, precise, a master of discipline. Tommy Lee Jones was 46, unpredictable, raw, and full of instinct. Together, they created lightning on screen. But behind the camera, that lightning never stopped striking. From the very first rehearsal, the difference between them was obvious. Ford liked structure. He studied every beat, every camera angle, every pause in the script. He approached acting the way a surgeon approaches an open chest, careful and exact. Tommy Lee Jones was the opposite. He played by instinct, jazz-like, wild, full of rhythm that changed every take. One man built the frame, the other set fire to it. Crew members called them two wolves circling each other in silence. There were no fights, no shouting, just eyes locked in quiet challenge. Each wanted to dominate the hunt, but only one could lead the pack. Director Andrew Davis said later that the tension on set was so thick he could feel it in the air. Every time Ford asked for another take, Jones rolled his eyes. Every time Jones improvised, Ford froze. Both men were professionals, but their styles could not coexist. Then came the tunnel scene, the most famous moment in the movie. The chase, the drop, the words everyone remembers. Jones changed a line mid-take, breaking Ford's timing. To the audience, the moment looked electric. To Ford, it was chaos. After the cut, he walked away from the set, silent, his jaw tight. He believed acting was a contract, a trust between partners. Jones treated it like a competition. When the film premiered, audiences went wild. It became one of the top 10 highest-grossing movies of the year, earning more than $360 million worldwide. Critics called it near perfect. Ford carried the heart of the story, the hunted man you could not help but believe. But when award season came, the spotlight turned. Tommy Lee Jones won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Ford, who bore the weight of the film, received nothing. Andrew Davis, the director, said it was one of the few moments he saw Ford truly angry. He believed Jones's win was deserved, but he also knew how much Ford had given to that performance. For Ford, it was not jealousy, it was principle. He respected the craft, the discipline, the invisible work that made the story real. When recognition came for the man who had disrupted that order, it felt like a betrayal of what acting was supposed to be. After the Oscars, the silence between them deepened. No harsh words, no public feud, just a cold distance. In 1998, the studio pushed to make a sequel called U.S. Marshals. Jones returned. Ford refused. He said nothing official, but everyone in the industry knew the reason. The wound from The Fugitive had never healed. Years passed, and both men became legends in their own right. Jones kept his trademark glare, winning respect as the no-nonsense Texas lawman in film after film. Ford carried on as the stoic hero, the man who never showed the storm beneath. They met at award shows, nodded politely, but never again shared a frame. Crew members who worked on The Fugitive still talk about the air between them. It was not hatred, it was gravity. Two planets too large to share the same orbit. Their silence became part of the movie's legacy. You can feel it every time they stare at each other on screen. The predator and the prey, neither willing to surrender. When asked years later about Tommy Lee Jones, Ford said only this: he is a great actor. And that is all I have to say. Short, controlled, final. Because for Harrison Ford, respect is sacred, but peace is optional. He does not forgive easily, and he never forgets. The wolf beside him made history, but it also left scars. And sometimes the loudest wars in Hollywood are fought without a single word. Number 3, Sean Young. The love scene built on hate. It was the year 1982. Blade Runner arrived like a dream that no one fully understood. Neon lights reflected in endless rain. Smoke curled through every scene. Every heartbeat on that set felt heavy and slow. Harrison Ford was 40 years old. He had already played heroes, soldiers, smugglers, men who never lost control. He believed in order, precision, and quiet power. Sean Young was 22. She was new, intense, and chasing the mystery of her first great role. Together, they were meant to create one of cinema's most haunting love stories. But what the audience would later see as cold chemistry was not acting. It was the truth. The filming stretched through winter nights, 50 days of rain machines and freezing wind. Ford arrived early every morning, lines memorized, movements rehearsed. Sean stayed inside her character. She spoke like Rachel, moved like Rachel, even when the cameras stopped rolling. Director Ridley Scott admired her focus. Ford called it strange. He told crew members he never knew if he was talking to the actress or the machine she played. As the days passed, the distance between them grew. Ford's discipline met Sean's emotion, and sparks never turned into fire. Cinematographer Jordan Cronenweth said watching them was like watching two magnets that refused to touch. Every glance carried tension. Every silence lasted too long. Then came the scene everyone remembers, the love scene, the one that was meant to turn darkness into desire. It took 3 nights to shoot. The set was soaked in rain, the air cold enough to see each breath. When the cameras rolled, their movements were stiff. Their eyes did not meet. Crew members whispered that the room felt colder when they were together. Later, they began calling it the hate scene. When filming ended, Ford was drained. He told friends that it was the hardest emotional sequence of his life. He respected Sean's dedication, but said it felt like performing surgery with his bare hands. Sean told her own story years later. She claimed the director had pressured her to date him, and that when she refused, the atmosphere changed. She believed that the difficult love scene became punishment. No one ever proved it. But the story never left the shadows. When Blade Runner was released, audiences were confused and fascinated. Critics said the romance felt distant and cold. They thought it was artistic choice. They did not know they were watching two people who could barely stand each other. Ford did not defend or deny it. He spoke only of the film, never of her. When time came for the sequel more than 3 decades later, Sean was replaced by a digital version of her younger self. Ford acted beside that ghost. No words, no reunion, only pixels and memory. Some say the tension between them gave the movie its strange beauty, that the discomfort became the soul of the story. Maybe that was true, but for Harrison Ford, the memory was not beautiful. It was work poisoned by mistrust, a chapter buried under the endless rain. Years later, when asked about Sean Young, he said that the past is heavy and better left untouched. Nothing more, no emotion, no regret, because to him, not every partnership needs healing. Some are meant to disappear quietly, like smoke beneath neon light, leaving behind only silence and a legend that still feels cold. Number 4, Julia Roberts, the chemistry that never existed. It was the early 1990s. Hollywood was building dreams faster than it could live them. Julia Roberts was the queen of the box office, the woman whose smile could sell a story before a line was written. Harrison Ford was already a monument, a living example of quiet power. When a new romantic drama was announced starring both of them, the studio called it destiny. The public called it magic waiting to happen. But from the first table read, everyone in the room felt the silence. Ford was calm, focused, built from discipline. He believed that emotion came from control, not chaos. Julia believed the opposite. She thrived on spontaneity, the freedom to breathe life into every scene. She tried to meet his gaze, to find rhythm. He looked back, polite, distant, unreadable. Director Mike Nichols later said it was like hearing two instruments play in different keys. Each note was beautiful, but together they created noise. The first week of filming went smoothly on the surface. They exchanged lines, hit their marks, and delivered what the camera needed. But when the lights turned off, the air between them stayed cold. Cinematographer Sven Nykvist described the energy on set as still water. Nothing moved, nothing flowed. The spark that should have burned through the lens never appeared. Julia tried to close the gap. She joked between takes, brought coffee, told stories to lighten the mood. Ford nodded, thanked her, and returned to his notes. He was polite but distant, as if saving himself for something that never came. When she reached for connection, she found a wall made of stone. He was not cruel but unyielding. That calm detachment that made him a legend on screen was the same quality that made him unreachable in real life. Then came the love scene, the one that was meant to carry the entire film. The script described passion, longing, two people finally surrendering to emotion. The reality was different. When the camera rolled, Julia leaned in, eyes bright, heart open. Ford met her halfway, but his energy was mechanical, practiced, empty of heat. Mike Nichols stopped the take after less than a minute. He looked at them and said quietly, "There is no rhythm here." They tried again, and again, but nothing changed. Julia's expression dimmed. Her frustration grew. She later told a friend it felt like acting beside a ghost. When the footage was reviewed, the truth was undeniable. The chemistry was not missing. It had never existed. The producers whispered about reshoots. The director spoke of artistic differences, and Ford kept silent. For him, the failure was not personal. It was professional. He told Nichols that acting with Roberts felt like working opposite a performance, not a person. That one sentence ended the experiment. The project was quietly shelved. There was no press release, no statement, no blame, just a slow fade into Hollywood rumor. The few scenes that survived were archived, never released, fragments of a dream that refused to breathe. The studio moved on. Roberts returned to romantic comedies, Ford to thrillers. They never spoke about it again. Not a single photo of them together is ever published. Years later, a producer who had worked on the film said the pairing was cursed from the beginning. He described them as sunlight and shadow. Julia wanted warmth. Harrison lived in the cool shade of restraint. Neither could change who they were. And sometimes, he said, two great forces cancel each other out instead of igniting. When asked about her much later, Ford gave a small smile that never reached his eyes. He said she was talented, generous, and brave. Nothing more. Julia, for her part, called him professional and distant, two short phrases that carried a lifetime of silence. Because in the end, not every story needs villains or betrayal. Some simply collapse under the weight of nothing. The chemistry that never existed became its own ghost, a reminder that even legends cannot invent love where it does not live. And for Harrison Ford, that quiet failure was less than enough. Number 5, Kevin Costner, the Western that died in silence. It was the mid-1990s. Hollywood was hungry for another great Western. Kevin Costner had just conquered the genre with Dances with Wolves, a film that won 7 Academy Awards and revived the spirit of the old frontier. Harrison Ford, 53 at the time, had long dreamed of returning to the saddle, to explore the quiet violence that lived inside men who carried guns but feared their own hearts. When a script landed on their desks, written by Lawrence Kasdan, the man who helped shape both their careers, the idea sounded like destiny. Two American icons writing together across a story of guilt, redemption, and revenge. It should have been a masterpiece. It never even reached the first day of shooting. The first meeting between Ford and Costner started with respect. Both were veterans, both perfectionists, both men of silence. Kasdan described them as opposite ends of the same horizon. But under that calm surface, two visions began to collide. Ford wanted a slow burn, a character study that explored the moral cost of killing. Costner wanted grandeur, the wide sky, the mythic hero standing tall in golden light. Each man saw the West as a mirror, but the reflection was different. In early pre-production, the tension grew louder than any gunshot. Ford arrived at script readings with pages covered in notes about motivation and silence. Costner arrived with sketches of landscapes and horses. They spoke the same words, but they were making different movies. Kasdan tried to bridge the gap, saying they needed both the heart and the horizon. Neither man would bend. The air in the room turned heavy, like the stillness before a storm. Soon, each actor began sending private revisions of the script. Ford trimmed Costner's dialogue to give his character more internal struggle. Costner expanded his own scenes, adding scale and spectacle. Producers received two versions of the same story, one intimate and quiet, the other sweeping and heroic. Kasdan said later it felt like watching two great horses pulling a wagon in opposite directions until the wheels came off. The breaking point came during a private conversation between the two men. Ford asked Costner, "Do you even care about what this man has lost?" Costner replied, "You are turning an epic into therapy." There was no shouting, no anger, just silence that filled the room like smoke. When they walked out, the project was dead. No press statement, no official cancellation, only a few words whispered between agents. The dream of a Ford and Costner Western was gone. Hollywood insiders called it one of the great what-ifs of the decade. Both actors moved on, but the silence between them never quite faded. Costner returned to the open range, directing his own vision of the West. Years later, he built Yellowstone, a television empire that turned the cowboy myth into family tragedy. Ford, in contrast, stayed away from the genre for decades, saying little about why. Only in his 80s did he finally return, quietly, in a new television series about ranchers. It was his own way of closing that circle, without ever mentioning the man who once stood beside him on paper. Those who worked closest to the aborted project still remember it clearly. They say the two actors respected each other deeply, but were prisoners of their own instincts. Costner chased the legend of the West. Ford chased the truth of it. Both were right. Both refused to compromise. And so, nothing survived. In the end, the Western that died in silence became a metaphor for both men. One sought the poetry of scale. The other sought the honesty of pain. The world might never know what their version could have been, but the echo of that lost collaboration still lingers, like wind over an empty prairie where no horses ride anymore. Number 6. Brad Pitt, The Cold War Behind the Camera. It was the year 1997. The film was called The Devil's Own. On paper, it was a dream pairing. Two generations of Hollywood's strongest leading men. Brad Pitt, just 33, was the face of a new era. Sharp, magnetic, unpredictable. Harrison Ford, 55, was the veteran, the steady hand, the man who had carried entire worlds on his shoulders. The studio expected fire and thunder. What they got was silence, a silence so heavy that even the camera could feel it. From the beginning, the project was troubled. Pitt had discovered the story years earlier and fought to bring it to life. He wanted a film about moral confusion, about a young man torn between loyalty and guilt. Ford joined later, drawn to the chance to play a policeman forced to question his own faith. Two complex characters, one Irish rebel, one American cop. It could have been gold, but almost immediately the visions clashed. Pitt believed the script should be quiet and political, full of questions and gray areas. Ford believed it needed a center, a balance, a moral weight that kept the story grounded. He told the writers to deepen his character, to give the police officer more heart, more conflict, more screen time. Pitt felt betrayed. He saw his passion project slipping away, scene by scenes. One crew member said later it was like watching two captains steering the same ship toward different horizons. Rewrites came every week. Lines changed overnight. One day the story belonged to Pitt. The next day it belonged to Ford. The production turned into a tug of war. Not with shouting, but with silence. No arguments, no insults, just quiet meetings and cold stares. When a director asked for another take, both men agreed, but their eyes never met. The tension bled into the movie itself. Scenes that should have burned with trust instead pulsed with distance. By the third month of filming, the crew stopped trying to hide it. Pitt and Ford arrived at different times, left through different doors. They spoke only when the cameras rolled. A journalist visiting the set described the atmosphere as a church during confession, full of words that could not be said out loud. Yet, even through the chill, the film moved forward. Both men were too professional to let it collapse. They delivered what the studio wanted, even as they drifted farther apart. When the movie premiered, critics noticed the strain. They praised the craftsmanship, but they could feel the divide. The chemistry between the two leads was fragile, like glass about to break. It made the story real, but also uncomfortable. The box office was strong, nearly $140 million worldwide, but neither man celebrated. There were no joint interviews, no photographs together. The silence continued long after the final cut. Years later, when asked about the experience, Ford called Pitt a wonderful actor and a really decent man. The words were kind, but the tone was distant. The kind of praise given by someone who has already let go. Pitt was equally careful. He said Ford was tough and exact, but that they had built two different movies. Both statements were true. In the end, The Devil's Own became less a collaboration and more a study in control. Two men, each protecting his vision, neither willing to surrender. The audience saw a tense, layered thriller. The industry saw something else, a quiet war fought behind the lens. There were no winners, no villains, no heroes, only two artists walking away from each other across the same set. And for Harrison Ford, it became another lesson written in silence. That sometimes, the hardest battles are not fought with anger or betrayal, but with patience, pride, and the long, cold distance between two men who both believe they are right. Number 7, Mel Gibson. The man Ford refused to stand beside. It was the early 2000s. Hollywood was still rebuilding its image after years of scandals and power games. Producers wanted something safe but grand, a film that would join two of the most bankable legends alive, Harrison Ford, the calm professional, and Mel Gibson, the wild genius who had conquered the world with Braveheart. The deal was almost done. Scripts were written, contracts prepared, money promised. It should have been one of the biggest collaborations of the decade. Then Harrison Ford said no. The decision came quietly, behind closed doors, but the shock moved fast. No one expected it. He did not argue about the script, the budget, or the director. He simply told the studio that he would not share a set with Mel Gibson. Executives thought it was a negotiation tactic. It was not. It was conviction. By then, Gibson's reputation had darkened. There were the reports of violent outbursts, the recordings filled with rage, and the night of the arrest that ended with headlines across the world. Anti-Semitic remarks, cruel rants, apologies that felt hollow. Hollywood still forgave stars who made money. But Ford was different. He had seen too much, lived through too many storms, to pretend that art was separate from the person who made it. He told a producer in private, "I will not work beside someone whose behavior poisons the people I trust to do their jobs." For a man known for silence, it was one of the clearest boundaries he ever drew. He did not shout, he did not shame, he just refused. And when Ford refused, doors closed, crew members began backing out. Cinematographers and designers quietly told their agents they wanted off the project. The studio tried to salvage it, offering replacements and rewrites. But the energy was gone. In less than a week, the movie was dead. Inside the industry, reactions split in two. Some called Ford a moralist, a saint who wanted to clean the dirt from Hollywood. Others said he was too rigid, too proud to understand that everyone falls. But Ford did not explain himself. He never does. He moved on to another project, spoke of it once, and never again. Years later, Gibson was asked about the failed collaboration. He smiled a cold smile and said, "Some people are actors. Some think they are saints. I do not answer to either." Everyone knew who he was talking about. Ford heard the quote and said nothing. He never needed to. His silence was louder than Gibson's words. The two men have never appeared together at an event, never spoken publicly, never been photographed side by side. For Ford, that moment was not about rivalry. It was about boundaries, a quiet declaration that no success, no paycheck, no legend was worth crossing his line of respect. In a town built on compromise, Harrison Ford chose principle. He believed that the people behind the camera mattered as much as the ones in front of it, and when that line was crossed, he would rather lose a film than lose himself. So the project vanished, and the silence remained. The man who played heroes on screen proved once again that the hardest courage is not in the fight, but in the refusal to stand beside what you cannot respect. When the stories end, what remains is not the anger or the silence. It is the pattern behind them, a lifetime of choices that reveal who Harrison Ford truly is. Through every conflict, every broken partnership, one thing never changed: his code. He never pretended. He never bent his principles for comfort or fame. He believed that loyalty mattered more than headlines, that respect for the work was sacred, and that silence could speak louder than 1,000 words. In a business built on illusion, Ford stayed real. He was not chasing love or forgiveness. He was protecting the truth of his craft. He could share the screen with anyone, but he would not share his trust with those who betrayed it. And maybe that is why his legacy still stands. Audiences can sense authenticity. They can feel when someone means what they say, even when they say very little. Every rivalry we uncovered tonight carries a lesson. The clash with Shia shows that gratitude is not weakness. The tension with Tommy Lee Jones reminds us that pride can be both a weapon and a wound. The pain with Sean Young and Julia Roberts proves that not all chemistry can be created. The silence with Kevin Costner, Brad Pitt, and Mel Gibson teaches that dignity sometimes lives in walking away. Ford's story is not about hate, it is about boundaries. It is about knowing when to stand tall and when to step back. Maybe that is what we can take from him: the courage to draw our own lines, to protect what matters, and to value honesty over comfort. Because loyalty, once broken, cannot be repaired with words, and forgiveness, when given too easily, loses its meaning. If you have stayed until the end, thank you for being part of this story. Now tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Share your city or your country in the comments below. And if you believe that truth still matters in a world that forgets too quickly, remember to subscribe to the channel. This is not just about Hollywood. It is about us, about what we choose to stand for when the lights go out and the cameras stop rolling. Stop rolling. Stop rolling. Stop rolling.